All right, gentlemen, we're about to go live.
Okay.
Good morning. We would like to welcome you to Happy Joseph's Journey presents Planning for Your Child's Future. We are so glad that you are able to join us today for this presentation. First, we would like to inform you of our mission statement. Happy Joseph's Journey is a community of autism advocates that aims to offer inclusive opportunities to educate, empower, enrich, and celebrate individuals on the spectrum, their families, and communities. Introducing our board of directors, I am LaTanya Winfrey. I'm your president. Miss Allison Simpson is your vice president. Ophelia Childress, our secretary. Labrina Winfrey, our treasurer. James Morris, our marketing director. Spencer Rollins, our philanthropy ambassador. And Andre Waller is our special events coordinator. The first thing we would like for you to do, if you have not already done so, please go to where you see the red words that say subscribe and subscribe to this YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Facebook at Happy Joseph's Journey, our Instagram at Joseph's Journey, our Twitter, Happy Joseph's Joe1, and our website is www.josephshappy.com. So we want to let you know about some upcoming celebrations. We all know that April is Autism Awareness Month, and we have some things that are coming up. On April 2nd, we are going to light it up blue. It is World Autism Awareness Day, and we want you to wear your Joseph's Journey shirt. If you have not already done so, you can purchase that through our website. April 17th, we will be having our Happy Joseph's Journey celebration, which will include an Autism Awareness Jeopardy Lab, a Zoom virtual background challenge, a merch contest that will take place throughout the month, and a surprise guest appearance. Can't wait to see who that will be. And on April 25th, we have a very special virtual education series. We will be releasing more information about that in the upcoming weeks. Also, for the month of April, we will release our newsletter. We will have autism trivia on our social media sites. We will guest spotlight some individuals with autism, and there will be video clips and book recommendations for anybody that is needing those. So the spotlight, we are looking for you. We are looking for individuals that have autism for Autism Awareness Month. If you know anyone, if you are someone, if you're a parent, family member, please send that person's bio with 2 pictures to thejosephsjourney@gmail.com, and we will be spotlighting those individuals in the month of April. Also, if you know of any awesome dads, any dads that are a dad of a child with autism or a father figure of a child with autism, please refer them to us, and they can also email us at thejosephsjourney@gmail.com. Also, the t-shirts that we will be wearing on April the 2nd are on our website. Orders will be taken until the 15th, which is this Monday, and we will be cutting off the pre-orders. So you can purchase that shirt at josephshappy.com. Just a reminder, don't forget to spring forward, set those clocks tonight. We don't want anybody being late, going where they need to go. So make sure you spring forward with the time. So before we begin, I want to introduce our host for today, which is none other than Andre Waller. He is a board member that serves as our special events coordinator. He is a 13-year educator in the MNPS school system. He has been an advocate for autism for both of his godchildren, Isaiah and Joseph. He has an affinity and love for children as he leaves his day job and goes to work with the youth at his church, where he serves as youth pastor. Reverend Waller is proud to be part of the Happy Joseph's Journey team and is excited to serve. And please let it be known, he is a life member of Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So our host for today is none other than Reverend Andre Waller. So I'm going to let him take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. I am glad that I have the opportunity to host today's conversation in our virtual education series, Planning for Your Child's Future. So this will be more like a conversation. If you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat on YouTube. The comment section is working. We've got all that working for you. So if you have questions as we go through, please make sure you drop those in the chat and we will get those to our speakers. At this time, I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers and we'll take it away from there. First panelist is Marcus Johnson, and Marcus is an experienced and knowledgeable financial planner from Nashville, Tennessee, who is ready to do work with you to enhance you and your family, business, or nonprofit financial future. Marcus has a degree in economics and finance from Tennessee State University and also holds his Series 7, Series 66 life insurance and health insurance licenses. After 6 years working on Wall Street with various firms, Marcus made the decision to start his own financial services company, Johnson Capital Planning, LLC. Over the past several years, he has worked with more than 500 clients to help them choose, invest, and manage plans that will offer them the ability to truly prepare for their future. As a financial planner, Marcus's main goal is to help his clients to make well-informed decisions on what types of investments are right for them. In his practice, he also emphasizes the need to adjust investment plans as your goals and needs change. Marcus will listen to your concerns and share information about potential investments, including benefits, risk, and tax issues, and he will treat your financial goals with the same care and interest that he devotes to his own. Marcus looks forward to being your trusted advisor and an expert resource as you build a secure portfolio of tailored solutions for your specific financial needs. Marcus was awarded the 40 Under 40 by Stay on the Go magazine in Nashville, Tennessee, and is a member of the Chairman's Council. Marcus sits on the board for From the Heart nonprofit, where he is passionate about giving back to his community. He has been a top producer in retirement planning since 2017 and continues to find ways to help clients retire comfortably. Marcus is also an accomplished jazz musician and has played in many places with a range of artists from Elle Varner to John Legend. He has an album on iTunes entitled Passion Speaks Louder. Marcus and his wife Jamaria enjoy traveling, spending time with family, and also recording their podcast entitled Our House, which can be found on iTunes. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have Brother Marcus Johnson. Next, we have Mr. Terrence Holt. Terrence is a graduate of Nashville School of the Arts, where he studied a wide range of music. Shortly after, he attended Nashville State Community College, where he had a focus in business management. Terrence is a results-driven, client-centered, process-driven leader with 7+ combined years experience in the corporate operation, life insurance, and personal finance industry. Verifiable talent for maintaining profitable operations with success in capitalizing on growth opportunities, implementing promotional marketing strategies, upholding fiscal integrity. Respected, trusted leader who upholds highest ethical standards. Terrence has a passion for educating clients on the full products and services he provides, and is also educating them on how they work. Full transparency, is what he hangs his hat on. To live limitless is what he believes is the best way to live, and that is Mr. Terrence Holt. Finally, we have Mr. Marcus Shute Jr., a native Nashvilleian and Tennessee State alumnus. He is a sports and entertainment attorney at Shute Law in Nashville, Tennessee. Shute enjoys leveraging his firsthand experiences and acquired knowledge of the law to shape the legacy of his clients. His passion for providing legal services for the sports and entertainment industries stem from his love of playing sports and musical instruments. That is Mr. Marcus Shute Jr. So, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome all three of our panelists at this time as they will go ahead and help us and kick off this conversation for financial planning and planning for the future. Gentlemen, feel free to take it away at this time.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate y'all for, taking the time to, set this up. I know this is important information that we're going to be giving out. For my sake, I want to make this as, non-formal as possible. So if people have questions or, any of that type of stuff, please don't hesitate to kind of just go through.
Yes, sir. No, not a problem at all.
So,
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So, I guess I'll kick this thing off, by starting off by saying that, I know that, raising kids with special needs is definitely going to be challenging, but it's not impossible. And so, I think one of the main things is just proper planning. And one of the main things I tell clients in this situation is that if you have a special needs kid, the focus is always on the health of the child. But what takes a backseat is that financial planning for someone whose life will likely extend beyond the traditional financial plan for themselves. So, I know we want to focus, on the health and making sure that stuff is right, but we also want to make sure that we take the time to, actually do some planning around the financial, parts. And so the lifetime cost for a person with autism generally averages between 1.4 million to 2.4 million. It's a lot of money, right? So, how are we going to really make that thing work? You know what I'm saying? And so we're going to kind of talk about that. And then one of the other things I want to point out is that, someone with special needs for 24/7 care can easily, cost around $100,000 a year. And so I think a survey was conducted by Mass Mutual, trying to pinpoint what was the biggest, concern for a kid with special needs. And it was prioritizing saving for long term for their own retirement, right? Because now you're talking about money, needs to be going for my kid with special needs, but also, making sure that I have enough money to live, and be able to retire as well. And so, that's a conflict. And I tell clients all the time, that you can do both things, right? So it's not like a one size, I have to do this, and go all the way in, or I have to do this, right? So we just want to make sure that, we're planning for both of those things. And so, it's important to map out your child's needs over your lifetime, independently, when you're gone, right? So what happens when, I didn't really plan for, if something were to happen to me and then my kid has to fend for itself. So if there's anybody on this call, who only thing they have is the coverage of life insurance through their job, you're probably uninsured, right? Or underinsured rather. And so that's something that we definitely need to take a hold on. But first thing I would tell people to do is to make sure that they do the medical assessment to kind of figure out what benefits that they can qualify for. So before a child turns 18, parents' income and assets are counted in most calculations by families, can apply for Medicaid. And so as long as the kid doesn't have less than $2,000 in their own name, then most of the time they can qualify for Medicaid, right? And so that's one of the important steps that we want to take. And once the child actually turns 18, they're eligible for supplemental security insurance, which is SSI, based on the level of disability that they have, and as long as they don't have assets under 2,000. They're saying that the average monthly benefit for most states is somewhere around $771, which could be, go for housing, utilities, food, any of that type of stuff. So, knowing what type of benefits you can qualify for is going to be key to a lot of different things. So we want to make sure that we're doing that. Another thing we want to make sure that we pay attention to is beneficiary designations are important to maintaining, special needs persons. So a lot of times, even outside of special needs, a lot of clients, they forget to put, a beneficiary down, and that causes issues when you start talking about planning. And so, we want to definitely make sure we hone in on that. And then another thing we can do is start figuring out how are we going to actually classify assets. So whether that's setting up, a special needs trust, which is a way to shelter assets. So we talked about earlier how, you know, you can only have $2,000 in the kid's name, or a way to get around that is to by setting up a special needs trust. And I'm sure that Marcus can, you know, kind of talk to you a little bit about that. But some of the things to note about that special needs trust is that these trusts are irrevocable. And so once money goes in, it can't come out for other purposes, right? So we need to make sure that when we put money in there, that we understand that this money is going into this trust and that it shouldn't be coming out. And you know, Marcus can kind of talk to a little bit about that. And outside for that, you know, if you're not doing that, sometimes people set up what they call an ABLE account or a 529A. And I know sometimes people hear about 529, but for kids to go to college, but this one is a 529A, or they call it an ABLE account, where you can put money. It's a state-run savings account that can be funded by special needs individuals, family members with after-tax dollars, and you can put up to $15,000 a year into it. And so that's one of the ways too. So either doing, you know, an ABLE or setting up the special needs trust, or doing both. And I don't know if Marcus wanted to kind of talk about the trust aspect before I continue.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me as well. So talk about the trust. The trust is a vehicle that is used to establish for estate planning professionals. Sometimes it can be used for specific needs. Sometimes it can be used to just shelter funds. In this particular aspect, there are a few different types of trusts. As Marcus Johnson said, that it can be dependent on, you want to provide some funds to set aside for if you're gone, once you're gone, and to help manage and maintain, you know, the lifestyle that the child currently has. And as he said, most of the time with these trusts, they become irrevocable upon death. And so when he's talking about doing the medical assessment and, you know, planning for what happens when you're gone, it's important to plan and to figure out, you know, who is going to be the person that you may want to be the trustee for this trust. And the trustee would be the person that has the control over the funds of the trust. And so I don't know if you want me to get too detailed into the trust level at this stage or just kind of touch on it and go on. But I think that, you know, what's important to grasp for this stage, what we're discussing, is that as you're doing your assessment and your planning for your future, for your child's future, you want to consider, you know, how are they going to be able to be cared for if you're not there? What person in your family or in your life is going to be responsible for helping to care for the child? Sometimes in some situations, it's not appropriate to want to leave property, if you will, or an asset for the child, because that can cause or create more problems down the line if something were to happen with that. So it's definitely important to try to sit down with your financial planner or your estate planning attorney to say, here are what my goals are. And I think that that's kind of where you should start, is tell them what your goals are. You know, we're in the service industry, so our job is to serve you and to meet your needs. And so by sitting down and saying, you know, I want to make sure that my child is cared for, I want them to have this type of lifestyle, I want them to continue this type of therapy, then you're enabling these professionals to be able to search for the product that best suits your family, as well as create the right, you know, trust if it's required, or a will, you know, or to just have someone that's in place to continue to do what you need to be done. So I think that I can touch on that part, Marcus. I don't know if you want me to get more detailed about the trust or the specific types of trusts. Okay.
Yeah, we definitely can. I know I see a question on here, and this is going to be kind of like a ping pong, you know, type situation. We're going to be kind of going back and forth, like I said. But one of the questions I see on here is, it says, what if a child under 18 is listed as the beneficiary? I would tell you that I wouldn't list the child's name per se, but actually, you know, having this trust set up, or, you know, the ABLE account, because we'll remember what we talked about earlier is that, you know, if the child has more than $2,000 in their name, right, you can mess yourself up from the benefits that you're getting if you're, you know, getting government assistance. So we want to be careful about how we're placing, you know, our kids on there, you know, as a beneficiary. I hope that answers that question. But one of the main things that I see parents do, and it's a real life situation, I just did this for a client, is they do what we call a second to die. Because the reality is that, and I'm gonna kind of get into what a second to die policy is, but the reality is that as your kid gets older, and as you start to age, right, you're probably gonna have some, you know, some planning to do as far as, you know, your health starting to decline, right? Because as we get older, the reality is our health starts to decline. And so, you know, that's gonna be, you know, probably one of the biggest issues that you're going to probably face is that, okay, as I'm getting older, right, how am I going to still maintain and make sure that my kid is taken care of? Or what happens if in the event that I have to go into, an in-home facility or nursing home, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be a huge issue. And so one of the things I tell people to do is probably looking into what we call long-term care insurance. And that's just making sure that, you will be able to afford any care on that regards. But going back to, the second to die, basically what it does is it's an insurance policy that you're putting on yourself and your spouse. And so what happens is the policy doesn't pay out until the actual second person dies. And then that money could go into what we call that special needs trust, if that's what we have set up. And then that money from that insurance policy could literally fund your kids' future for the rest of their life. And so it generally is in conjunction with another product that we call an annuity, that money goes into, so that person can get a monthly payment for the rest of their life. And so, that's just sitting down and talking with a planner to kind of figure out what do we want that to do. As far as, how much coverage you need, it really just depends on your situation, right? How much are you wanting to cover? But for you guys, kind of being cheap on the insurance side is probably not one of the options that you're going to have, right? So we just want to make sure that we're actually thinking about, what we really want this, money to do. How long do we want it to, take care of the kid, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if you had anything to add to that as far as anything.
I mean,
Yeah.
no, that was pretty accurate. And then to just to kind of piggyback off of listing a child as a beneficiary, that's probably one of the most common mistakes I've seen in the past 3 years. Even just reviewing policies, or people just saying, "Hey, I want to list my kids as a beneficiary," and basically what happens with that is, because a child is a minor, the insurance company can't pay that money out to a minor. So if something happens to you, let's just say today, and then you have, children that's listed as the beneficiary, that money won't be paid out. And it'll just essentially bring a bigger just headache on the family during that time of grieving. So of course, to both Marcus's point, of course, sitting down with somebody who can actually review what you have to basically see where you stand, to make sure that your family and or kids are protected properly.
I agree. And so here's a list of things that you can do to kind of do, consider your kid's future. Number one is having an emergency savings. All right. I recommend that you do, between 3 to 6 months of expenses, just in case something happens. But this is just going back to, planning as a whole. This is just not just for special kid needs kids, boy, right? But this is just as a whole. We should always have that emergency saving kind of set up, right? The next piece of it is that you can't neglect yourself, right? So you have to have some type of retirement savings, because at the end of the day, right, we want to make sure that we're able to replace today's dollars tomorrow, because at the end of the day, we know we're getting older, and it's probably going to be taxing to have a kid with autism as well. So we want to make sure that we're actually putting that money to the side as well. And so, one of the things that you can do to kind of figure out how much you're going to be doing is I tell people to do what I call a spending plan, right? So not a budget, but a spending plan, because at the end of the day, spenders spend money, right? So we want to make sure that we're, kind of going through our finances and making sure that we're living the way that we should be. And so you can do both, right? So having that emergency savings, started to have a plan for retirement. For your kids' sake, we talked about having that 529A, right, contributions, or having the special needs trust. I mean, either one. But just understand that once money goes in there and something happens, when you pass away, whatever money is in that special needs trust is irrevocable. So, we got to think about that as well. The next thing I would tell you is to have a plan for life insurance, right? So again, I'm gonna make sure that I reiterate that if the only thing that we have is the insurance that we're getting from our job, we're failing ourselves, right? Because number one, how long do you plan on being at that job? That's number one. Number two is that once you leave that job, then that insurance goes away, right? And so that's going to be an issue for you. And then the last thing that I would tell you is that is a way to protect this is to make sure that you have a will. And I want to make sure that Marcus definitely goes into what goes into a will, and having the adult guardianship, which he kind of talked about and spoke about a little bit. But knowing those key areas to just making sure that, you know, everything is protected and that the kid can have a, you know, a prosperous life.
So, is there a difference between planning for a child that's, or planning for one of our children that's under 18 versus over 18?
I wouldn't say it's a huge difference. I will say that, you know, once a kid is over 18, you have to think that if the kid's over 18, you're probably older as well, right? So you're aging. And so, you know, it's going to be different factors are going to be coming into it. Because what if you're at the point where, you know, now you're at retirement, and once you get to retirement, you're kind of living on a fixed income, right? You're not really taking a whole bunch of, you know, extra risk. And I wouldn't encourage you to take a whole bunch of risk when you're at retirement. So I think that the biggest thing from it now is that while your kid is under 18, we should be planning for them when they get to 18. So we should be doing more so of that planning while they're kids, right? Versus when they get older. We should already pretty much have everything in place once they get older. So I say the early years is, you know, kind of some of the most important time to be thinking about what we want our money to do. And that's by sitting down with someone who can kind of plan this out and map this out for you. But one of the things I tell people is that there's no one size fits all type situation, right? So it's not like a generic thing where I can just say, hey, you know, you should just do this, right? It's all dependent, right? You know, because I know there's different levels of kids and special needs, right? So maybe your kid doesn't need as much as, you know, the next kid. So it really just depends on, you know, your specific situation.
So I'll say that there is, you know, some different plan that you should consider when you're thinking about a child that's an adult, that's an age of majority, and a child that's a minor. As has been said before, when you list a child as a beneficiary in a policy, or if you give a child something in a will, like an asset, typically that child can't receive that asset until they're at the age of majority. And Marcus touched about, you know, having a last will and testament. And I like to fly. And one thing that, you know, whenever you fly, they always tell you when the oxygen mask comes down, you have to put it on yourself first before you can do it on your child next to you. And it's kind of the same thing when you look at your estate plan or your last will and testament. Like, you've got to take the time to figure out, you know, what you're going to do, what you want what do you want to happen with your property, what do you want to happen with your personal items, you know, your personal belongings, anything that you have to sit down and do that. And with considering with your child, whether your child has special needs or whether your child doesn't have special needs, it's imperative that in our community, speaking about the Black community, if we have assets, if you're married and you have a home, you own property, then you need to have a will, because you need to know what's going to happen with that property. If you don't have a will, there are laws in place that will direct what's going to happen with everything. But you can mitigate a lot of that by sitting down and saying, here's what I want to happen for my family. And some other things that you want to consider are a living will, or sometimes called a medical advance directive. That says if you're getting some medical treatment, you know, and you become incapacitated, what do you want to happen? To your, if you get into a terminal condition, do you want to be resuscitated? These conversations we have to have with ourselves and with our parents, and, you know, especially if you have a child that has special needs, do you want the medical, you know, facility to continue on, you know, doing those things? If you're incapacitated and you can't communicate that, then how are they going to know how, or the next person that comes in after you pass, that's supposed to care for your child, they need to know, you know, what steps they need to take to care for your child. And so all that comes down to starting to look at self and to say, what do I want to happen with me first? And then you kind of go from there. Some other documents that are important to have, you know, especially when you have a child that has special needs, is a power of attorney. If you need to have someone that can help handle those affairs with you, the financial aspect of it, medical documents, you want to make sure that they can achieve that. And then the last thing I would say is a healthcare power of attorney that specifically authorizes somebody to make medical decisions for somebody. So I've talked about 4 different documents, and those 4 documents are what I would consider a basic estate plan. I think that every person that has any asset, that has, you know, if they're married, if they have children, they should have those basic 4 things, because, and we're talking about trust. Trusts are a higher level of what I would call a will and testament, right? It's very specific and things you can do while you're living. The last will and testament is what, you know, after we're gone, we pass away, that's what your family or your executrix or executor is supposed to follow in administering your estate. And so again, that's why I say, kind of going back to the airplane, if the airplane's going down and it's inevitable, we're all going to pass it someday, at some point. You've got to take and, put the oxygen mask on yourself and help your family. Saving them a lot of time and stress on the front side while you're alive. You do the work, while you're alive. If not, your family's they can argue, they can cause a rift. There's a lot of things that we see in death. When people are grieving, they act a lot differently. So we can mitigate a lot of that by trying to get a lot of our affairs handled on the front side. So a will is absolutely imperative. Again, I would highly encourage you, if you have any piece of property, if you're married, or if you have a child, that you would have a will so you can say what you want to happen. And Marcus Johnson mentioned about a guardianship, for your minor child, especially again, if we talked about godparents, or I may not have, but if you mention, if you say, this is my godparent, then you can actually codify that and put that in a document so that that person understands what their responsibility would be after you pass. So,
all great points. I see a question in here, and it says, when planning for retirement, what are some things that need to be considered as far as having a financial plan for your child? I would say, first thing first is understanding, number one, when do you want to retire and what does that look like? Because a lot of times people say that, when I retire, I want to travel, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but it's so high level. I would tell you that you probably need to, kind of find it down a little bit more, right? So what does retirement really look like for you? What does a day look like for you? In retirement? Am I traveling? Is that domestic or international, right? And so, for kids with special needs, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Because now you're talking about making sure and ensuring that your kids, especially if they can't, work for themselves, right? So, your money has to really, your dollars have to be told what to do versus your money telling you what to do in a situation like that, right? So, number one, figuring out when you want to retire, and then figuring out, how much money is it going to cost to maintain your kid's lifestyle? And so, those two things can kind of happen simultaneously, but it just needs to be mapped out. Saying, okay, we're going to put this much money here. If something happens to me at this point, I need to have this much coverage, and this money needs to go into this, entity, whether it's the trust or, the ABLE account or whatever it is, right? But I have to make sure that I stress enough that, if you're on the Medicaid or getting government assistance or any of those, entities, that we're not putting this money into the kid's name, because then that means that even if they're minor or, an adult, then you're waiving those benefits. And so then now you're going to be in a whole nother situation. So I would tell you that probably the best route is to having some type of other entity set up, whether, like I said, if it's the ABLE account or if it's the special needs trust, whatever it is, right? You talk with your attorney to figure out which one makes the most sense for your specific, situation. But we want to make sure that's happening. I don't know if you want to add anything to it, T or Marcus.
I would say no, that was pretty accurate. I can agree.
Okay.
But yeah, but I do we'll say, just to add on to what you said, it's just like there's a lot of talk about, hey, I want to retire at 50 and I want to travel the world, so on and so forth. Those things sound great, but again, like you said, what are you specifically doing to achieve those goals? Have you had that conversation with the retirement planner, or even yourself? Hey, how much money will I need to do that? What would I need to have coming in each month to sustain this lifestyle for the next 20, 30 years after you, quote unquote, retire? So those are realistic conversations you need to have with yourself and your planner as well, too.
And then, kind of just to piggyback on that, man, I think this is one of the most important things I can tell you today is that, so many people think that retirement is about assets, and that's completely false. It's really about income, right? Yeah. So it's about retirement is all about income, no matter what you say, because if all your money is tied up into your assets and you need money, what are you going to do? You're going to sell that asset, right? So now you don't have the asset anymore. So really it's still about the income. Now, can we get assets that produce an income for us? Absolutely, right? But at the end of the day, it's still about that income piece, right? So we want to make sure that when we're planning for this retirement, that we understand that really what we're trying to do is replace those dollars tomorrow. And that's something that we can help you, around that conversation.
Most definitely.
So how do you apply this conversation to families that don't have special needs children?
So,
Uh,
go ahead.
I would say just really high touch. Okay, I'm sorry, my phone rang. I would say I would say just with that, just very high touch. If the children aren't special needs, there does have to be some type of realistic conversations to happen with them. My father passed away 8 years ago, and prior to him passing away, he told us, what he wanted us to do with the home, the money he was leaving behind, so on and so forth. So when he passed away, it was a very seamless and smooth process because we knew what was going to happen to the home, what we was going to do with the money, so on and so forth. So in our community, and especially specifically the Black community, those are very hard conversations to have with each other. But for me, knowing what I know, from firsthand experience, is something that I'm really comfortable with having, because I know how imperative it is to have these conversations with, your children and your wife and your spouse, so on and so forth. And then even to piggyback off of what Marcus was saying earlier, what Marcus Shue was saying earlier, about the power of attorney as well too, because nobody thinks something is going to happen to their spouse, to where they can't, think or speak for themselves. So having a power of attorney, even if, and we found this out as well too, even if you are a husband or a wife, that doesn't necessarily always give you access to make those types of decisions. In every situation, it doesn't.
And just a little bit more, I think we was wanting to get towards what does it look like if the parents don't have a special needs kid for retirement?
Right.
Okay, so the main thing I would tell you is this: it's a quick equation. So if you guys got pen and paper, I would tell you to write this down, because this is something, this free game that I'm about to give y'all. So you might as well just soak this up. So what I tell people is that the number one question is, how much money do I need at retirement? I get that is like the most common thing. How much money do I need to have at retirement? And like I said, I'm about to give you this free game. I see Marcus laughing. I'm about to give you this free game. All right. So here's what you do. You take your desired income times 2 times 20, which equals your retirement saving goal. So I'm gonna say that again. Your desired retired income times 2 times 20 equals your retirement saving goal. So let's put that in an example. So if I wanted $100,000 of income, right, I would take times 2 times 20, which equals $4 million of retirement saving. So if I want to live off of $100,000 for the rest of my life, I need to have $4 million saved up at retirement. That is the equation. Okay. Now, how do I do that? Well, number one, right? So there's really only two things you can do. If you get to retirement or close to retirement and you find out that you are far away from $4 million, when you get ready to retire, there's only two things you can do. I don't care who you talk to, right? You can talk to Joe Smo down the street. Two things. Number one, I can cut my expenses. I mean, maybe I need to live off less. Or the other thing is I got to work longer, period, right? So I'm going to have to work longer in order to do that. And some of the vehicles that you should be utilizing, right? So if you're working for an employer and they're offering you a 401k, you have to participate, especially if they're giving you a match. Now, we can talk about contributing to a 401k if they're not contributing a match to you, because then I would have a completely different mindset on if you should be contributing now, because there are better vehicles out here. Because we got to remember, all the money that goes into a 401k is pre-tax, right? And
not on me interrupt, can you, for those that may not be hip to the lingo, what's a vehicle in the financial world?
My bad. I appreciate that, brother. So a vehicle is the different instruments that you use in order to make your money grow, right? So a vehicle could be, your IRAs, your 401ks. It could be an annuity. It could be, the actual instrument or the account that your money is being held in, right? And so inside of those accounts, you're going to have different type of investment options, right? So from stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, right? You're going to have all different types of different vehicles that you can have your money, invested in. And so when we talk about 401k, because that's what most people understand, and somebody might say, well, I have a 457 or I have a 403b. All of those are the same thing, okay? 401k, 403b, 457, those are all just IRS tax code, meaning retirement. And so, one of the main things I make sure that I drive home to people is, because I ask people all the time is, do you know how much money you can contribute into your 401k yearly? Nobody knows, right? They'll say, I can do 6% or I can do 3%. That's the max. No, that's the max that your employer is going to give you. That's not the max amount of money that you could put in there. And so that number is 19,500, right? And so, I tell people all the time, if your employer is giving you 3%, you better at least be doing 3%, right? Because that's free money. You're not getting that anywhere else, right? So that's going to help you get closer to that $4 million if that's the goal. And then that can't be the only thing. And so one of the things that I also talk to people about is that you want to make sure that you're not putting 100% of your money into one vehicle, right? So that vehicle could be real estate, right? Because I know that's real big right now. And everybody, thinks that real estate always goes up. But the reality is, if you look at the numbers, that's not necessarily true. It's been true here recently that real estate has been going up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be that way, right? And so I wouldn't want to have 100% of all my money into real estate, because what happens is what if we get into a market where I need cash and then, people aren't buying, right? And I can't sell a portion of a house. I can't sell mama's kitchen. I got to sell the whole thing, right? So having all my money in, real estate is not liquid. So what does liquid mean? It means I can get to that cash, right? And so, I think we should have real estate? Absolutely. But it shouldn't be all. And the same goes to, should I be dumping all my extra money into my 401k? I don't think so, right? There's other things, right? Because now you're talking about having all this money into a pre-tax vehicle, right? And that means that when you get to retirement, you still ain't paying no taxes on this money. So now I got to worry about that as well. And so, having your money into different vehicles. So going back just one more time, I don't think I said this on this call, but there's 3 places you can put your money, okay? Taxable, tax-free, and tax-deferred. The majority of people are putting their money in tax-deferred buckets because that's where the majority of people's assets is in their 401ks, 403bs, 457s, et cetera, right? And then the taxable would be, your real estate, your business, et cetera. The bucket that kind of gets overlooked the most is that tax-free bucket, right? Which is, you can have your Roth IRAs, you can have your muni bonds, you can have, your IULs, right? And so, making sure that you put your money in all of these different buckets and making sure we diversify the way we put our money, but not only diversifying the way we put our money, but diversifying the way we get money, okay? Having multiple ways to get money generally helps you out when you want to get to this $4 million that we talked to. I see one question on here. It says that, is there a way to get life insurance if you have been declined for a medical reason? If so, what is the process? Yeah, it depends. It depends on what you got declined for, right? So if you got declined because, you had too many parking tickets, yeah, we can get around that. Or if you got declined because you have, high blood pressure, yeah, we can kind of get around that. But if if you have cancer and, some of the big things, then it's going to be more difficult. But there are what they call, guaranteed whole life policies that are out there. The reality is that you're going to pay a little bit more for them because their insurance company is taking more risk, but they are out there. And then the other thing that, I would say to that is that you're probably not going to have a huge death benefit, right? So I haven't really seen any guaranteed whole lives that, you're going to get more than $100,000 of coverage. And at that $100,000 of coverage, it's probably going to be expensive. So, for all my people on here that are young and healthy and vibrant, get it now, right? Don't subscribe to this Dave Ramsey, I'm just going to get this term, insurance, because then what happens when you actually need it, then you probably won't have it. And so that's a conversation that we can, kind of get into when we're on a one-on-one. But yeah, there are possible ways for you to get insurance if you've been declined. But if you've been declined in the last 12 months, it makes it difficult, but there are some options out there for you.
Anybody have anything else to add to that question?
No, it was pretty spot on.
Okay, so as far as when the parent dies, what happens if the guardian of the child doesn't spend the money the way it's supposed to be spent?
I'm gonna let Mr. Shute take that one.
Well, so in this hypothetical, I would presume they're in Tennessee. So a lot of it depends on where this occurs. If there's some illegal activity, There are different agencies, like, you know, if it was an elder abuse, you would call Adult Protective Services and file a report and say that you think somebody's being taken advantage of. Most of the time, well, in this instance, I would probably tell them to call, you know, the police to start an investigation. They will probably be taken to a fraud detective or some, you know, because they're doing something fraudulent. Um, Typically, if the guardian is the one that's taking the money, then the child doesn't have the mental capacity to be able to sue them or to file a lawsuit. So that's not really something where, you know, you can go to court for if they're under 18. And if they are over 18 and they lack the mental capacity, most of the time there's a conservatorship. In those cases, in conservatorships, the court appoints an attorney ad litem, and that attorney's responsibility is to look at the best interests of the ward or the prospective ward. So again, it kind of depends on where the legal standing is of the individual. If they are not dealing with the court from a conservative perspective, and this is just a guardian from where an adult has passed and the child is in the care of somebody else, then whoever has that note, the information about the person being taken advantage of would have the duty to report it or call, you know, to try to start an investigation.
Thank you. How do you account for the cost of living increases when doing your planning?
So, so number one, you know, the whole idea is, I'm assuming you're talking about inflation. So for those who don't know what inflation is, you know, basically inflation is your purchasing power, right? So every year we live life, prices around us get more expensive. On average, they say about 3%. And so one of the ways to combat that is by making sure that your money is invested, right? So if we're sitting in cash, you're losing money. And so one of the basic principles that I talk to people about is called the rule of 72. And so if you're talking to someone who doesn't understand money and can't articulate what the rule of 72 is, you probably should stop having a conversation with them about money. And so basically what that is you take the number 72 and you divide it by the interest that you're receiving from whatever vehicle that your money is invested in, right? So let's just say that you have a savings account sitting at the bank with Bank of America. The reality is that Bank of America is not paying you more than 1% to have that money sitting in that savings account. It's probably way less than that, but we're just going to say 1% to be, you know, use it for our purposes. So let's say I have $1,000 sitting in there. I'm getting 1% on my money. How many years would it take for my money to double? And so we use the rule of 72. And so you take 72 and you divide it by that interest, which is 1%. And that's going to be 72 years, right? So if all my money is sitting in there, 1%, it's going to take 72 years for my money to double. Now, going to your point about inflation, if inflation is 3% and I'm only getting 1% on my money, I'm actually trailing at a negative 2%, right? So on a 10-year span, my $1,000 is really only worth $700. That's a problem. So, you know, one of the main principles with talking to an advisor is to say, okay, where can I put my money that the minimum I can at least get 3%. Now, am I going out and saying that I want you to get 3%? No, I'm saying we want to do better than that, but on a minimum, we need to be at least doing 3%. And there's so many different ways. So, you know, point is that we can't just have our money sitting in cash because that's, you know, that's counterintuitive, right? We got to make sure that we have our money sitting somewhere that is actually making money for us. It's working for us, right? We've been seeing that. I want to have my money working for us. I mean, people coming to my office and saying that now, right? Because it's popular. But I mean, the reality is you do, right? So because cash sitting on the sideline and cash sitting under mama's mattress, that just ain't the wave, right? But there's a wealth gap because we haven't been doing that, right? So, you know, sitting in mama's basement or you didn't bury the money in the backyard, you're losing, right? We want to make sure that that money is working for us.
Looks like we got a question. Marcus, shoot, he can answer this.
Yeah, so the question is, what's the difference between a revocable and irrevocable trust? And the second question is, which one best benefits a family with a special needs child? So when I asked Marcus to explain what is a vehicle in the finance world, a trust is a vehicle, if you will, in the legal world. And what that is it gives you the opportunity to have an entity or a person or a faux person, if you will, hold funds for somebody for a specific purpose. Typically, most trusts are living revocable trusts. So for instance, if you were to sit down with me and to do an estate plan, I would say that, your estate, your trust, if we created one, would be a living revocable trust because you are living. What that means is that as long as you are living, you can revoke the trust. You can sign a document that destroys the trust after you've moved the assets, and which is another aspect of a trust. We've not talked about that at all. That when you create a trust, you have to fund the trust. The trust just can't be an empty shell, if you will. It has to be funded by some source of funds, or an asset needs to be put into the trust. But so to answer the question about what's the difference between revocable and irrevocable, if I make a revocable trust for Marcus Shute, and when I die, it becomes irrevocable because I can no longer revoke the trust. I can't bring the trust back. I can't make any changes to it. And that's what makes it permanent and irrevocable. And asking about which trust benefits a family with special needs. So there are there are three different types of trusts that I see primarily with families with special needs. Sometimes it's a pooled special needs trust where a third party or a nonprofit organization is there to help pay for the child's needs, where it doesn't conflict with Social Security income. There's also a third party special needs trust. Sometimes like grandparents will set up a trust either through a vehicle that Marcus was talking about earlier, or through a will upon their death. And then when they die, this money funds that trust, and that trust specific purpose is to help with care or services that the child with special needs without interfering with the dependent's monthly SSI income. And then another one is just a trust, is a first party special needs trust, where the trust is created with the dependent's own assets. And the difference about that is that under the terms of those types of trusts, when the dependent dies, the state Medicaid agency gets those funds right at the end of that dependent's life. So there are there are different types of trusts. It's hard for me to say without knowing the specifics about your family situation, which one would benefit you. But again, like we've been encouraging you to sit down to figure out what your goal is for your child, so that way that we can, or whoever you talk to can give you the best advice on which trust that you need. There's another question in there about, in guiding my young adult children ages 21 and 23, how much life insurance whole life term should they have?
So I'll take it, I guess. One of the main things you want to do is what they call a need analysis or a need assessment. And so there's a few different numbers that they throw out, but so if I make, you take your income, you multiply it by 20, and that's how much coverage you should have. Or I've even seen it by 50, right? Which I kind of lean a little bit more towards that, because what you want to do is, most people understand that, insurance is for, replacing income, covering debts, etc. But what they don't usually account for is what we call human capital. And that's our ability to make money in the future. So if we go out today, how much more money could I have made if I had, 20 or 30 more years to live. And so that's kind of what I tell people to think about when you talk about getting coverage, because we want to make sure that, especially if the need is to benefit somebody who can't fend for themselves, right? So somebody, special needs, or, maybe you have a child that's not special needs, but you want to make sure that if something happens to you, that you can still cover college, weddings, everybody's talking about generational wealth right now, right? But everybody's still only buying $200,000 and $100,000 policies, right? We need to kind of get out of that, because that's just what we was used to. We actually need to sit down and figure out, okay, what do I really want this to cover, right? Do I want to take care of my kids' wedding, college, actually leave them some assets? Because I guarantee you this, if everybody started getting, $1 million policies, I guarantee the police probably wouldn't want to be shooting us down as much, right? I guarantee you that. So, really thinking about what that coverage amount looks like for your particular family. But if you want to go with the standard living, standard of living quote that they usually say multiply by 20, I would say, you want to look at it by 50. And when I mean multiply by 20, I mean your income. So if I made, $20,000 for, I'm just using the example, you probably would need somewhere around $500,000 of coverage, right? But you really want to look at that and figure out, what that looks like for your situation.
I think that question is very. So the question is asked: if the child isn't able to receive benefits right now due to the parent's income, is it possible for them to receive the benefits once they turn 18? If yes, how should those funds be managed for the future?
I'm not exactly sure on that as far as the kid not being able to get benefits. I haven't.
I was going to say that seems very like very like a specific circumstance about the parents' income, and that might be more aligned or appropriate for an offline conversation.
Yeah, I believe so too.
Because we would probably need some more background information about the child and what benefit they're not being able to receive right now.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the question is, if they receive the SSI benefits after 18, how do you manage that money for future planning?
Okay. And you're saying like that money that it's for SSI, it's a specific fixed income, and you're saying how can those funds be managed for financial planning?
Yes.
So the Social Security has some rules about what you can do with the funds. And so it would be very important that, if they are the payee for the person, or even if the child becomes their own payee, that, they use those funds for what the purpose of them are for. They could run into some issues if they take those funds and use them for other services that they're not to be used for. So that's why I think that we might have to have an offline conversation about it. Because generally speaking, if they're getting the Social Security, then it's supposed to go for certain, I guess it depends on what the initial SSI application. That's why I keep saying it has to be. It's some other factors that we have to know to kind of answer that.
I think the important part of this whole conversation is that you see that working with an advisor and an attorney is essential, because we go hand in hand. And so trying to, have shortcuts and use one or the other is probably not going to be in your best interest. You're definitely going to want to have both of the parties involved with each other, because we truly do go back and forth on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and Dan, to your point, Marcus says all the time that when it comes to any type of planning, that it is not a DIY project at all.
Facts. So somebody said if they want to talk next steps, I can give you an email to email us, and we can kind of get it out. And that's info@johnsoncap.com. Shoot us
put it in the chat.
Yeah, I put it in the chat. You're right. Appreciate it. Yeah, shoot us an email, and then we can coordinate a time to get on a call with all of us. We work together, and we can make something happen in that regards, for sure.
At this time, gentlemen, I don't see any other questions, either from the live feed or on our connection on our call.
Okay.
If you have any closing remarks or closing statements you'd like to offer, feel free to do so at this time. And I'll go ask for Mr. Shute first, followed by Mr. Holt, and then you, Brother Johnson.
All right. So the only thing that I have to close with is that, I hope that you all take from this call, every adult person should have, a basic estate plan, which is, a last will and testament, a living will, a healthcare power of attorney, and a general durable power of attorney. Those four things are, 4 documents that can save your family a lot of headache and a lot of time. When, obviously, if you have to use any one of those documents, some emergency has happened in your life. And so it's better to plan for it instead of being reactive. So that's the only thing that I will leave with everybody. Thank you for the time. We appreciate you giving us this opportunity to educate, our community and your following. So thank you for that.
Yes, and just the same as Marcus Shute just said, Just basic planning can save you a world of headache, because I know personally I've been through it on every side of it that we spoke on today. And I tell people, just a weekend of adulting, 1 or 2 times a year, it'll make life a lot more easier on you when those times come.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, if you're ready to have a conversation to kind of see where you're at, we do free consultations. Well, I say free at our cost, right? Because it's still our time, right? Time is valuable, so it's at our cost. And I hate using that word free, and I'm mad it just came out of my mouth. So we're here to help. If you like what we're saying, one of the main things you can do too is spread the word about what we're doing and the good work. And so, we hope to have a conversation with you pretty soon.
I would just like to thank the gentleman. Like the first piece of information you gave about not assigning the child as the beneficiary, like I had never heard that before.
Yeah.
So you all just came out the gate giving out some good nuggets about this financial planning. So I appreciate you all for participating for today. We had some great questions that opened up more dialogue. So thank you all for taking your time out today to be a part. And I will let Andre Waller close us out.
Again, as Ms. Winfrey said, thank you guys for showing up and showing out with the knowledge and information that you all have provided and so graciously given us. This will be on our YouTube channel, the Happy Joseph's Journey YouTube channel. This will all be in our group. So if you're not following the page, Happy Joseph's Journey on Facebook, if you're not following the YouTube channel, Happy Joseph's Journey, all social media, subscribe, like, share. This information is good for those with and without special needs, because everyone needs to have their planning in order and have their business straight. So again, we thank you all for joining and tuning in with us. Make sure you get your shirt ordered by Monday so you can rock blue on April 2. So we need you to order your shirts. And I think that's all we got. I think that's it. Miss Winfrey, anything else?
No, that is all.
Okay, I didn't forget nothing. All right. Hey. So again, thank you guys. And we look forward to the replay on the YouTube channel.